No one remembers the exact day it happened, because nothing exploded, no alarms went off, and no one officially announced that the town was about to die. Yet when people later looked back, they all described the same feeling, that strange realization that something had quietly gone wrong, and that life, as they knew it, was slowly slipping away without permission. Centralia was not a ghost town waiting to happen. It was a real place, with real families, real routines, and a future that, for decades, seemed just as stable as any other American town built on hard work and coal dust. Children walked to school every morning along streets that had names and stories. Shop owners opened their doors at the same hour every day. Church bells rang on Sundays, and nothing about Centralia suggested that it would one day become one of the most unsettling abandoned places in American history. And yet, today, if you drive through the hills of Pennsylvania where Centralia once stood, you won't find a bustling town. You won't find busy streets or open stores, and you won't even find ruins in the traditional sense, because what remains feels less like the aftermath of a disaster and more like a place that was simply erased. This is the story of a town that didn't collapse, didn't evacuate overnight, and didn't disappear in a single moment, but instead faded away so quietly that by the time people realized what was happening, it was already too late to stop it. Centralia was founded in the mid-1800s, not by accident, but by opportunity, because beneath the hills of Pennsylvania lay vast coal seams that promised jobs, stability, and a future for anyone willing to work hard enough to claim it. By the time Centralia began to grow, coal wasn't just fuel, it was power. It heated homes, drove industry, and shaped entire regions. And towns like Centralia existed because America needed what lay hidden underground. Families settled here with the belief that the land would provide for generations. Houses were built close together, schools expanded, and the town developed the kind of rhythm that made people feel rooted, as if leaving was never even a question worth considering. This was not a temporary mining camp. It was a permanent town with paved roads, post offices, small businesses, and neighborhoods where everyone knew each other's names, faces, and histories. Even when coal production began to slow decades later, Centralia did not immediately decline, because the people who lived there had already built their lives around more than just the mines. They had traditions, memories, and a sense of belonging that could not simply be packed into boxes and taken elsewhere. For the residents, Centralia felt safe, familiar, and dependable, a place where the future seemed predictable enough that no one imagined it would ever become uninhabitable. And that sense of certainty is what made what happened next so disturbing, because the town did not fall apart due to war, economic collapse, or a sudden catastrophe, but because of something small, routine, and almost laughably insignificant at the time, something that no one believed could destroy an entire town. In the early 1960s, Centralia faced a problem so ordinary that no one gave it a second thought. Because it wasn't a crime, a disaster, or even a controversy, it was simply trash. Like many towns at the time, Centralia used an open pit on the outskirts of town as a landfill, a common solution in an era when waste management was handled with convenience rather than caution. When the pit began to overflow, the solution seemed obvious and inexpensive: burn it. Controlled burns were routine. They reduced waste, eliminated pests, and were considered safe enough that similar fires were set in towns across the country without incident. Local officials approved the burn, workers lit the fire, and for a brief moment, everything went exactly as planned. The flames died down, the smoke cleared, and life in Centralia continued without interruption. But what no one fully understood or chose to question was what lay beneath that landfill. Because the pit was connected, directly and invisibly, to the vast coal seams running under the town. When the fire reached the coal, it did not go out. Instead, it slipped underground, beyond sight, beyond reach, and beyond control. At first, there were no warnings, no explosions, and no immediate danger. Only the assumption that the problem had resolved itself and that whatever had been burning was finished. But underground fires do not announce themselves. They wait. For years, after the fire disappeared underground, Centralia carried on as if nothing had happened, because there were no headlines, no official warnings, and no visible signs that anything was wrong beneath the streets where people lived their daily lives. But slowly, in ways that were easy to dismiss at first, the town began to change. Residents noticed faint smoke rising from cracks in the ground, thin white streams drifting up from empty lots, backyards, and forested hillsides, often mistaken for morning fog or steam caused by cold air meeting warm soil. Some people reported strange smells, sharp and sulfur-like, lingering in certain areas, while others complained of headaches, nausea, or dizziness, symptoms that were rarely connected to a single cause and were easy to blame on stress, work, or coincidence. Then came the heat. During winter, snow would melt in unusual patterns, revealing long, bare streaks across roads and fields, as if something beneath the surface was quietly radiating warmth. And while some found it curious, others found it unsettling because it didn't behave like anything natural they had seen before. Still, no one panicked. Officials reassured residents that the situation was being monitored, that underground coal fires were not unheard of, and that there was no immediate danger. And for a town built on mining, fire underground did not sound like an impossible threat. But the ground continued to change. Cracks widened along roads and foundations, opening slowly, sometimes overnight, sometimes over weeks, splitting asphalt and soil as if the town itself was under strain. And while repairs were made, the damage never truly stopped. In some areas, carbon monoxide levels began to rise, invisible and odorless, seeping into homes and buildings, turning basements and enclosed spaces into silent hazards that could not be detected without specialized equipment. The danger was no longer theoretical, it was measurable. Yet, even then, many residents chose to stay, not because they ignored the risks, but because leaving meant abandoning homes, memories, and a way of life that had defined them for decades, and because no one could say for certain how bad things would become, or when. What made the situation even more disturbing was the uncertainty, because the fire had no clear boundary, no predictable direction, and no timeline. It moved underground in ways that defied easy mapping, sometimes retreating, sometimes advancing, always hidden. And as experts debated solutions and funding stalled, the town found itself trapped between reassurance and reality, knowing something was wrong, but not yet understanding how much worse it was about to get. Centralia had not been evacuated, it had not been condemned, but beneath its streets the fire was spreading, slowly rewriting the future of the town without asking anyone's permission. For many residents, the fire remained an abstract threat until the day it proved it could reach the surface without warning, turning quiet streets into places of sudden danger. In 1981, A 12-year-old boy was playing in his grandmother's backyard when the ground beneath him gave way, opening into a deep, smoking sinkhole that swallowed him without hesitation, and for a few terrifying seconds, it seemed as if the town had claimed its first life. The boy survived only because his cousin managed to grab his arm at the last moment, pulling him back as carbon monoxide poured from the opening below, a near miss that transformed speculation into undeniable reality. What had once been discussed in meetings and reports was now visible, violent, and personal. Government inspections intensified, and measurements revealed what many had feared. Carbon monoxide levels in some homes were high enough to be lethal, and the underground fire showed no signs of slowing down or burning itself out. Experts attempted to contain it. Trenches were dug, barriers were constructed, and millions of dollars were spent trying to isolate the burning coal. But each attempt failed because the fire did not behave like a single source. It branched, spread, and adapted underground, finding new paths through abandoned mine tunnels that no longer existed on official maps. The realization slowly set in that this was not a problem that could be solved with time or money alone. It was permanent. For residents, this knowledge was devastating, because staying now meant gambling with their lives, while leaving meant surrendering everything they had built. And for many, neither option felt acceptable. Some families moved out immediately, unwilling to take the risk, while others stayed behind, clinging to the belief that the danger was being exaggerated or that a solution would eventually be found. The town began to fracture. Houses were abandoned one by one, schools lost students, businesses closed their doors, and entire streets fell silent, not because of evacuation orders, but because neighbors simply disappeared. What made Centralia's collapse so unsettling was the lack of chaos. There were no mass evacuations, no sirens, and no dramatic final day, only a slow, uneven retreat as people left in different waves, each departure making the town feel more hollow than before. And as Centralia emptied, the fire continued to burn, indifferent to who stayed and who left, steadily consuming the future of a place that had once believed itself untouchable. By the mid-1980s, it was no longer possible for officials to pretend that Centralia could be saved, because every study reached the same conclusion. The fire could burn for decades, possibly centuries, and there was no reliable way to stop it. The government made a decision that would permanently change the town. Residents would be offered buyouts, their homes purchased and demolished, and Centralia would slowly be erased from the map, rather than allowed to remain a place where people could die without warning. For many families, the offer felt less like help and more like surrender, because the money could never replace what was being taken: memories, history, and a sense of belonging rooted in the land itself. Some accepted the buyouts and left, while others refused, challenging the decision in court, arguing that they had the right to stay in the homes they had lived in their entire lives. But the town was already collapsing around them. Buildings were torn down, streets were closed, and landmarks disappeared one by one, until familiar places became empty spaces with no explanation, as if the town had never existed at all. In 1992, the state officially condemned Centralia, declaring it uninhabitable. And years later, postal authorities revoked its zip code, a small administrative action that symbolized something far more profound. The town was no longer recognized as a place meant for human life. And yet, a handful of residents stayed. They lived among the empty streets and overgrown lots, surrounded by warning signs and steam rising from the ground, choosing familiarity over safety and defiance over disappearance. To them, Centralia was not a disaster site or a cautionary tale. It was home. Their presence made the town feel frozen in time, not fully abandoned, but not alive either. A place caught between existence and erasure. As decades passed, nature began to reclaim what people had left behind. Trees pushed through cracked pavement, grass swallowed sidewalks, and silence settled where voices once filled the air. The fire continued to burn below, unseen but unstoppable, a reminder that Centralia was not destroyed by force, but undone by something that could not be reasoned with, negotiated, or outrun. All that remained was the question no one could answer, not how the town died, but how long its ghost would continue to exist. Today, Centralia exists in a strange and uneasy state, not quite alive, but not entirely gone either. A place where maps show almost nothing, yet the ground still tells a story. Only a few residents remain, living under long-term agreements that allow them to stay until they pass away, after which their homes will be removed and the land returned to silence. There are no schools, no stores, and no real streets left, only fragments of asphalt leading nowhere, warning signs posted against an invisible danger, and the constant reminder that something beneath the surface is still burning. The fire itself is expected to last for hundreds of years, feeding on coal seams too vast to exhaust in a single lifetime, making Centralia one of the longest-running man-made disasters in American history. And yet, what keeps people fascinated is not just the fire. It's the way the town vanished without a single defining moment, without a final evacuation day, and without a clear ending. Because Centralia did not collapse in chaos, it dissolved quietly, one decision, one family, and one abandoned home at a time. For visitors, it feels unsettling, because nothing looks dramatic enough to explain the absence, and the silence feels intentional, as if the town is actively hiding what it once was. Centralia forces an uncomfortable realization that places do not always disappear because of sudden tragedy, but sometimes because of slow neglect, underestimated risks, and decisions that seem harmless until it is too late. It stands as a reminder that modern life, no matter how stable it feels, is often built on systems we barely understand, and that when those systems fail, the consequences can stretch far beyond what anyone intended. The town that vanished overnight did not truly vanish overnight at all. It vanished slowly, invisibly, and permanently. And long after the last resident leaves, the fire will still be there, burning beneath the ground, preserving the memory of a place that was never meant to disappear.